The November wind in Chicago wasn't just cold, it was cruel. It felt personal, a physical bully that found every tear in Imani's worn coat and ripped through to her skin. At 23 years old and 8 months pregnant, Imani had learned to measure time not in days, but in degrees of cold. She was huddled in the alleyway behind a closed-down bakery, a spot she'd chosen because a ventilation shaft still breathed out the faintest memory of warm, yeasty air. It was a pathetic comfort, but it was all she had. Life had unraveled with terrifying speed. She had aged out of the foster care system with a thin folder of papers and a bus ticket, found a job at a diner, and then lost it when the morning sickness became too much for her boss to handle. The baby's father had evaporated the moment she said the word doctor, leaving her with nothing but the tiny, insistent life kicking beneath her ribs. Now her home was this sliver of pavement, shielded from the worst of the wind by a dumpster and a stack of rotting pallets. As the sky bruised to a deep, icy purple, the rush-hour crowd hurried past the mouth of the alley, faces buried in scarves, eyes fixed on the promise of warm homes. They were ghosts to her, and she was less than a ghost to them. She was trying to curl into a tighter ball, pressing her gloved hands against her belly to shield the baby, when she heard it. It wasn't the wail of a siren or the rumble of a truck. It was a sound so small and thin, the wind almost stole it. A child's sob. Imani froze. It was a high-pitched, terrified sound, completely out of place in the grimy darkness. She pushed herself up, her joints aching in protest, and shuffled toward the street. She looked left, then right. Nothing. Just the endless stream of hurried footsteps. Then she heard it again, closer. "Mommy?" The voice was a tiny thread of sound. Imani's eyes darted to a massive decorative marble planter in front of an office tower. Tucked in the dark space behind it, a small figure was shaking. Imani moved slowly, her hands raised and open. "Hey there, sweetheart. Are you okay?" The crying hitched. A little boy, no older than 6, peered out. He was wearing a beautiful dark wool coat, the kind she'd only ever seen in department store windows, but his face was streaked with dirt and frozen tears. His dark hair was messy, and his eyes were wide with a terror that clawed at Imani's own heart. "I'm lost," he whispered, his body trembling so hard she could see it from several feet away. "I can't find my dad." Imani crouched, a painful process that made her groan. "It's okay, honey. I'm Imani. What's your name?" "Leo," he sniffled, rubbing his nose on the sleeve of his expensive coat. "We'll find him. But first we need to get you out of this wind. You're freezing." She held out her hand. He hesitated for a second, his eyes scanning her worn-out boots and the huge swell of her belly, but the desperation for an adult, any adult, won. He slipped his tiny cold hand into hers. Her first instinct was the police. She scanned the busy street, her heart pounding. She saw a police cruiser parked at the next intersection, its lights off. "Look, Leo! Police! They can help!" She led him over, her steps slow, her hand clutching his. 2 officers sat inside, windows rolled up. Imani tapped gently on the passenger side. The window buzzed down a few inches, letting out a blast of warm air and the smell of coffee. "What's the problem?" the officer in the passenger seat asked, his eyes immediately cataloguing Imani from head to toe. "Officer, I found this little boy. He's lost. He says he can't find his dad." The officer's gaze shifted to Leo, then back to Imani. It was a look she knew well, suspicion, annoyance. "You found him? Where?" "Just back there by the planter. He's freezing. Can you help him?" The driver leaned over. "Lady, we know the routine. You pick up a lost kid, bring him to us, hope for a reward or a hot meal. Or maybe you're trying to get a spot in a shelter for the night?" Imani recoiled as if slapped. "No, that's not. He's lost." "Sure he is," the driver said, his voice flat. "Look, we're on a call. Social services is on the other side of town, and they're backed up. Don't you have family you can go to? If I had family, do you think I'd be out here? Imani shot back, her voice rising with a desperate anger. Please, just help him, the passenger officer sighed. Ma'am, move along. If you loiter, I'll have to call child services on you for endangering your unborn baby in this weather. Now go. The window buzzed shut. The finality of it felt like a door slamming in her face. Imani stood there, stunned, her hand tightening on Leo's. The little boy looked up at her, his brief spark of hope extinguished. A cold, hard fury settled in Imani's chest, overriding her own hunger and pain. She looked down at Leo. "It's okay, baby. It's okay. I got you." She couldn't take him to a shelter. They were full, and a woman alone was one thing, but a woman with a child that wasn't hers. They'd separate them in a heartbeat and accuse her of kidnapping. She had exactly $6.48 in her pocket, money she had been saving for 3 days to buy a hot meal. It wouldn't be enough for a motel, not even for an hour. She made a decision. She led Leo to a small 24-hour diner. The bell on the door jingled, and the few patrons looked up, their eyes lingering on her belly and her ragged coat. She ignored them and sat Leo in a booth. "I want you to order something hot, okay?" She flagged down a waitress. "A grilled cheese sandwich and a hot chocolate, please, for him." The waitress nodded. When the food came, Leo looked at it, then at Imani. "Aren't you eating?" "I ate earlier," she lied, her stomach clenching in a painful knot. "You eat. You need to get warm." She watched him devour the sandwich, the warmth of the diner fogging the windows. She paid the bill, leaving her with just 48 cents. There was only one place to go. Her home. "Come on, Leo. I have a place we can stay." "It's not much, but it's dry." She led him back through the alley, past the bakery, to the far end where the alley met an overpass. Under the massive concrete arm of the highway, she had built a small shelter of cardboard and 2 old tarps. It was shielded from the wind, and it was the driest place she knew. Inside, she had her one treasure, a thick, insulated sleeping bag someone had thrown out. It was dirty, but it was warm. "Here," she said, unzipping it. "You get in." But where will you sleep?" he asked, his voice sleepy now that he was full and out of the wind. "I'm okay right here. I'll be your guard." She zipped him into the sleeping bag, tucking it around his chin. He was asleep in minutes. Imani sat outside the sleeping bag, her back pressed against the freezing concrete pylon, her coat wrapped as tightly as possible. She rubbed her belly, whispering, "It's okay, little one. We're okay. We just have to be strong for one more night." The city roared around her, but in her small, cold corner, she guarded the sleeping child as the temperature continued to drop. The sun was a weak, grey smear in the sky when Imani's body, stiff and aching, finally gave up on the pretense of rest. She hadn't slept. Every gust of wind felt like a slap, and her hunger was a hollow, echoing pain. Beside her, Leo was still zipped tightly in the sleeping bag, his breathing even. He was warm. That was all that mattered. She gently shook his shoulder. "Leo, hey, sweetheart, we have to go. We have to find your dad." The boy's eyes opened, confused for a moment by the concrete ceiling. "I'm hungry," he mumbled. "I know, baby. Me too. We'll find your dad, and he'll have a whole kitchen full of food, I bet." She helped him out of the bag, her back seizing in protest. She had no money, no food, and no plan, only a 6-year-old's hand in hers. "Leo, I need you to think hard. Your dad. Does he have a name?" "Daddy," Leo said. "I know, but his name, like I'm Imani. He's—" "Arthur," Leo said, his head perking up. "His name is Arthur." "Arthur. Okay, that's great. Arthur. And where do you live? A street name?" Leo shook his head. "The big house, with the gates. And the lions." "Lions." What did that mean? A statue? A team logo? It was Chicago. It could be anything. She had one last, desperate idea. This boy's coat wasn't from a department store. It felt like cashmere. His shoes were tiny, perfect leather. This was old money. We're going to go for a walk, Leo, to where the really big houses are. She led him out of the alley and headed north toward the Gold Coast. It was a walk that would have taken a healthy person an hour. For Imani, it felt like crossing a desert. Every block was a mountain. The baby was sitting low, pressing on her hips, and her feet, swollen inside her damp boots, felt like they were being stabbed with each step. Leo, full from his meal, was more energetic, but after an hour he started to lag. "Carry me, Imani." "Oh, baby, I can't. You see my belly? I can't lift you right now, but we're close. I can feel it." She was lying. She had no idea where they were going. But they passed a grocery store, and the smell of rotisserie chicken made her so dizzy she had to lean against a mailbox. She was failing. She was failing this boy, and she was failing her own baby. After nearly 2 hours, as the first stinging flurries of snow began to fall, Leo suddenly stopped. He yanked his hand from hers. "The lions!" he screamed, his voice filled with pure joy. Imani looked up. They were standing in front of a massive 20-foot-high iron gate set into a stone wall, and on top of the 2 main pillars sat 2 enormous carved stone lions, their manes dusted with snow. A security booth was built into the wall. As Imani and Leo approached, a guard stepped out. His uniform was crisp, his face was hard. "Ma'am, this is a private residence. You can't be here." He lives here," Imani stammered, pointing at Leo. "His name is Leo. He says his father is Arthur." The guard's face, which had been set in simple annoyance, twisted into a smirk of disbelief. "Arthur? You mean Mr. Thompson?" "Right. That's a new one. Look, lady, I don't know what kind of scam you're running, but you have 10 seconds to take the kid and leave before I call the cops." "We already tried the cops," Imani cried, her voice cracking. "They wouldn't help. Please, just ask him. Just call the house." "I'm calling the cops," the guard said, reaching for his radio. "Daddy!" Leo suddenly shrieked, letting go of Imani and pressing his face against the iron bars. A sleek, black Bentley was gliding silently down the long, curved driveway. The car stopped, the back window lowered, and the man inside, Arthur Thompson, stared. His face, sharp and handsome, went ghost white. "Leo!" He was out of the car before it had fully stopped, fumbling with his keys to unlock the pedestrian gate. He burst through and scooped his son into his arms, burying his face in the boy's hair. "Oh my God, Leo! Leo, where were you? We've been looking everywhere. The police, everyone." Leo was sobbing. "I got lost, Daddy, and the police were mean, but Imani saved me. She bought me a grilled cheese." Arthur Thompson finally looked up, his eyes red-rimmed and frantic, landing on Imani. He saw her coat, her hands blue with cold, her exhaustion, and the impossible swell of her pregnancy. The security guard was stammering, "Mr. Thompson, sir, I didn't know." Arthur silenced him with a look so cold it could have frozen fire. He never took his eyes off Imani. You found him." "He found me," Imani whispered, swaying on her feet. The adrenaline was gone, and darkness was pressing in at the edges of her vision. Arthur, still clutching Leo, grabbed her arm. "No! You're not fainting. Get in the car, now!" The inside of the car was silent, warm, and smelled of rich leather. They drove to the house, a modern palace of glass and stone. As they entered, a housekeeper rushed forward, crying in Spanish. Arthur sat them in a vast living room with a fireplace that was a wall of flame. Within minutes, the housekeeper, Maria, had brought Imani a steaming mug of tea and a plate of toast. She ate it so fast she barely tasted it. Arthur sat opposite her, Leo now asleep on his lap, and had her repeat the story. When she got to the part about the police officers and the sleeping bag under the overpass, his face hardened into a mask of controlled fury. They dismissed you. They saw you, and him, and they dismissed you. He looked at her, his gaze intense. You spent your last $6 on my son. He was hungry, Imani said, as if it were the simplest, most obvious fact in the world. I run a technology empire, Ms. Imani. I deal with liars and thieves and opportunists all day, and in 24 hours you've shown more integrity and courage than any of them. I'm not going to let you go back to that alley. He stood up, still holding Leo. I own this entire property. There's a 2-bedroom guest cottage by the garden. It's fully furnished. It's yours, as is a job. You can help Maria in the house, or I don't care. You will have a salary. You will have health care for you and your baby. You will be safe. Imani just stared, the tears she hadn't shed in the cold, in the diner, or in front of the police, now flooding her face. She was safe. Her baby was safe. As she was about to accept, the front door opened, and a woman's voice, sharp as breaking glass, echoed in the foyer. Arthur, darling, I just heard the most dreadful news about Leo. Thank God he's... A tall, stunningly beautiful woman with platinum blonde hair, wearing a white wool suit, strode into the room. She stopped dead, her eyes fixing on Imani, on her torn coat and the plate of toast. Her perfectly drawn smile faltered, replaced by a look of cold confusion. Arthur, she said, her voice dropping. What on earth is this? Arthur's eyes, which had been soft with gratitude, turned to flint. He stepped slightly in front of Imani, a protective gesture that was as unconscious as it was immediate. This, he said, his voice dangerously quiet, is Imani, the woman who saved my son's life. The woman who was willing to sleep on frozen concrete to keep him warm when my entire security team and the Chicago PD failed. The woman, Cynthia, let her eyes drift over Imani's torn coat and swollen belly with an expression of profound disbelief, as if she were looking at a stain on the carpet. Saved him? Arthur, that's precious. But look at her. She's homeless and pregnant. She probably saw an opportunity. This is a classic shakedown, darling. You're smarter than this. She spent her last $6 on him, Arthur cut in, his voice like ice. She didn't ask me for a reward. She asked the police for help. When they refused, she was the help. Cynthia let out a small, tinkling laugh. And now you're giving her the guest house? Arthur, you're not a charity, you're a target. What will people say? You can't just adopt strays. I'd rather adopt a stray with integrity than dine with a viper who has none, Arthur said. The silence was absolute, broken only by the crackle of the fireplace. What did you just say to me? Cynthia whispered. Arthur turned to Imani. Imani, my housekeeper Maria will show you to the cottage. Please, get some rest. You are safe here. Imani, clutching her empty mug, nodded, not trusting her voice. She didn't want to be in the middle of this. As she followed Maria out of the grand room, she heard Cynthia's voice, no longer light, but a low, vicious hiss. You are making a terrible mistake, Arthur. You're letting trash into our home. This isn't over. Imani settled into the guest cottage. It was a paradise she couldn't have dreamed of. A soft bed, a hot shower that never ran cold, a kitchen stocked with food. She slept for 14 hours straight, a deep restorative sleep, free from fear and cold. For the next 2 weeks, a new quiet routine formed. Imani helped Maria with light duties, mostly folding laundry or organizing the pantries, anything she could do while seated. Arthur was often busy, but he made a point to have dinner with her and Leo every night. Leo, in turn, was glued to Imani's side, reading picture books to her belly, which he had nicknamed the Bubble. Imani felt her body and spirit healing, but Cynthia was a constant, cold presence. She would appear unannounced, ignoring Imani, speaking only to Arthur in low, urgent tones. Imani noticed something unsettling. Cynthia never, ever touched Leo. She never asked him if he was okay. Her concern about his disappearance seemed entirely performative, a script she was reading from. One evening, Arthur was late. Imani was in the main house kitchen helping Maria clean up after dinner when Arthur and Cynthia entered through the back, deep in an argument. They didn't see her in the adjoining pantry. "You have to get rid of her, Arthur. It's indecent," Cynthia was saying. "It's been 2 weeks. She's had her reward." "I will not discuss this again, Cynthia. She's a guest. More than that, she is Leo's hero." "His hero or yours? The way you look at her, it's disgusting. She's a pregnant vagrant." "She's a better woman than you'll ever be," Arthur roared, his patience finally snapping. Cynthia snapped back. "You fool! You have no idea what I've done for us. That boy, he's a distraction from our future. He has always been the problem." "What are you talking about?" Arthur's voice was suddenly dangerously low. Imani held her breath, her hand flying to her stomach. "When we went to the park, that day he got lost," Cynthia said, her voice dripping with venom. "It wasn't an accident. I paid my old driver to lure him away, just for a few hours, just to scare him, to make him more compliant. More willing to stay with a nanny, so I could be the priority. He was just supposed to take him to an arcade. But the idiot, he actually lost him." Arthur stood frozen, his face a mask of dawning horror. Imani stepped out of the shadows, her eyes wide. Cynthia's face went white. You were willing to lose him." Arthur's voice was barely a whisper, but it was more terrifying than his yelling. "Arthur, I did it for us. You put my son on the street, in the cold, where anything could have happened to him. The night he met Imani, he could have died. Cynthia had no words. Arthur pointed to the door, his hand shaking with rage. Get out of my house. If you are not gone in 5 minutes, I will call the police and have you arrested for conspiracy to kidnap. My lawyers will be in touch." Cynthia stared, her mask of perfection shattered, revealing the ugly, selfish core. She gave Imani a look of pure hatred, then turned and stormed out. The front door slammed, echoing through the massive house. Arthur slumped against the counter, his head in his hands, finally letting out a shuddering breath. Imani walked over and, hesitantly, put a hand on his arm. He looked up, his eyes filled with a broken, raw gratitude. "You," he said, his voice thick, "you, a stranger, you saved him. From her. From me." "We saved each other," Imani said softly. 6 months later, the garden was in full bloom, a riot of summer color. Imani sat in a cushioned lounge chair, rocking a small bassinet with her foot. Inside, her daughter Hope slept soundly. Leo, now 7, was lying on the grass next to her, drawing a picture. "This is us," he announced, holding it up. It was a drawing of the stone lions, the big house, and 4 stick figures. A big one, Arthur, a medium one with a circle on her belly. Imani, he hadn't updated his drawing, a small one, him, and a tiny one, Hope. "It's perfect, Leo," Imani smiled. The gate buzzed, and Arthur walked up the path, his suit jacket off, his tie loosened. He wasn't the frantic, furious man from that winter. He was calm. He kissed Imani, a soft, familiar gesture, and then peered at his daughter. "She slept?" "Like an angel," Imani replied. He looked at Imani, at the life they had built. "You know," he said, "I thought I had everything. I built an empire. But my house was just glass and stone. It wasn't a home. Not until you got here." Imani leaned her head on his shoulder. She remembered the cold concrete, the hunger, the despair. It felt like a different lifetime, a story about someone else. She looked at the two children, safe and loved, and at the man beside her. She had been searching for a safe place, and instead she had made one.